All right, welcome everyone. This is going to be module 1, video number 5. And in this video, we're going to be talking about what's called it's actually chapter 3. So we've covered chapter 1, chapter 2 with modules 1.1 through 1.4. We're going to go ahead and call her chapter 3, which is going to go ahead and be in this next module. And this is going to go ahead and be about how to get help, okay? Getting help. And one of the more important things about this is that I talked about this a little bit in the other videos, is in the Linux environment, part of the great thing about the Linux world is that it's an open source community. So if you don't know what you're doing or you're having problems or something, more than likely you can just go ahead and type up something in Google and you'll be able to find a bunch of different people in forums maybe having similar problems, and they can kind of help walk you through these actual issues. Now, but I want to go ahead and actually talk about like how, if you don't do that, you don't know what if you don't know, not too sure how you want to do this, you need to be able to know, how do I go ahead and look stuff up in Linux? Well, there's a way we can do this. There actually is some really awesome commands. We can actually get a good plethora of information about the entire commands that we can run within the Linux environment, okay? But before we go there, I want to kind of touch on something that I want to expand on something. So we talked about this a little bit earlier about like the terminal and how it's actually very similar to the command prompt or to PowerShell, okay? Well, the terminal actually is what we refer to as actually a terminal emulator. So as you become more familiar with the Linux environment, Linux world, you're going to find out that there's we talked about this, how there's certain lingo that you should kind of like start making yourself familiar with. So this right here is called the terminal emulator, okay? And within the terminal emulator, we're going to be using what's called a shell. Now, there are a couple different things we need to know about what is a shell. Well, a shell is actually going to be the type of access of commands we have. And there are multiple different shells. So to get an idea of this, I'm going to actually go ahead and run a new command. This is going to be called PS. And this stands for process status, okay? So notice right here that this right here actually corresponds to my bash shell. And what this stands for born again shell. Now, within the born again shell, there actually are several other different types. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw this over here on my board. Oh, actually, let me go ahead. Okay, so apparently I can't share okay, that's fine. I can go ahead and fix that. Let's go to Paint. All right, so we can make that fit. Oh yeah. So what we're going to talk about is, I'm going to go ahead and make this. All right, let's go. So we have something called the bash shell, which we talked about this. This actually stands for born again shell. Now before the bash shell, there actually was something just called shell. And this actually stands for the born shell, okay? So before born again, there was just the born shell. Now within the born shell and the bash shell, there are other couple shells. There's going to be something called the C shell. There's also something called the corn shell. And there's also something called the Z shell, okay? So these are some of the shells that you're going to be experiencing. Most of the time, you're going to be working in what's called the bash shell, the born again shell, okay? So, touched on that and everything else. Now let's go and talk about this. So we're talking about like removing ourselves away from the GUI. So we don't want to be doing this point and clicking and double clicking and stuff like that. We want to be able to go ahead and maneuver ourselves and become very powerful by understanding the commands within the Linux operating system. So let's go ahead and go over through some commands or things that you, as someone that's going to be Linux or anything, should become familiar with. First one's going to be called ID. And what this is it gives me the identify who I am on the system. So you can see that there, we get the UID. I'm part of the group student, and we can go into this a little bit more in the module 3. And the next one's hostname. Now, this is going to be the name of the computer that we are on. Notice the computer's name is test subject. Next one is uname. Now, uname really doesn't give me much with Linux. However, in chapter 1, we talk about it and it's mentioned, or in chapter 2. But this is actually when we can start adding these variables or these options, okay, or these flags. So I can do uname tac r, and this is going to go ahead and give me the actual, like, the kernel information. So this is the kernel I'm running, the Linux kernel that I'm running. And I can do uname tac a, and this actually gives me a little bit more. Now, I do want to go ahead and actually stress, I haven't talked about this, but instead of having to retype the command, one of the cool features of Linux is that you can actually scroll up through this actual, all the commands you run within these, like, within the history. So it does actually keep a running history about that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in later sections. So let's go ahead and look at this a little bit more. So we did that one. We can do IF config. This is going to be networking information. We can also do another IF config or another type of IF config, which is called IP. Okay. This also deals with network information. We also have netstat. This is network status. Okay. So this is the status of my network right now that that my box is currently under. We also have SS. This is socket statuses. So whenever you create sockets or sockets are created, I'm not going to go into that right now. PS, which stands for process status. Notice I'm running two different processes. I have the PS command that I just ran, and I have the born again shell that I'm running right now. We also have who. Now remember we talked about this. We said who am I? That's actually identify, the user I'm actually am. ID identifies, gives you more information. But who also gives you who else is logged into this box besides yourself. Then we also have env, which these are the environment variables that are set up for each session or each user that gets logged into the operating system. Then we have lsblk. This is list blocks. So ls, like the ls command, list blocks. And this is going to be having to do with your actual notices with the hard drive. Okay, hard drive blocks. We also have lsusb. This actually lists the USBs that are available on the box. And right now there's two of them. There's one for virtual USB tablet and one for the root hub. Okay. And lastly is lsof. This lists all open files on the system. Because remember, we talked about this in the Linux file in the previous chapter, in the previous module. We talked about how the actual Linux operating system, everything on it is a file. Okay, so you can see a listing of all the different files that are open, and it gives you where they're located to on the far right. You can see right here. Okay, so these are a lot of commands. And you may be thinking, well, how do I know what these commands do? How do I know how to actually write them properly? Well, there's a couple different ways we have to go ahead and understand this. For the most part, basically, in actuality, for the most part, when we talk about the commands itself, we can go ahead and actually see that in actuality, the commands that we run, there actually is a format to them. So let me go ahead and actually, I'm going to clear this up real quick. And then from there, let me go ahead and, sorry, let me fix this real quick. Selection tool. All right, so we have this idea right here. So the way it's going to work is when we actually talk about like how do we actually structure our commands. I'm going to increase this to 20 to 36. All right, so the way it's going to work is it's going to be command, okay? And then it's going to be option or shins. You can actually tack on more than one option. And sometimes after you tack on the option, you have to go ahead and give it the variable, okay? So you have to give it the variable that you want it to go ahead and add. And then once you go ahead and do that, then you have to give it the parameter, okay? And we'll see this a little bit more in how this works, I think. But this is actually how commands work. You issue the command. Sometimes you also have, we talked about this in the last couple of lectures, I think you may have to add the mother may I command in the front if you're not the root user, the administrator. You give the command, you sometimes have to give an option. you provide the variable for the option, then you also go ahead and give the parameter, okay? So let's go talk about this a little bit. So the way this kind of works is we take this idea, we're like, well, you know, how do I know what these commands are? Or how do I know how to go ahead and structure these commands? Well, we have to consult something called the man. And the man actually stands for, it's very simple. Man actually is short for manual. So the manual for each of these commands. So within the actual command line or in the Linux operating system, there's a manual that we can consult for each command. So the best way to do that is to go ahead and do man. Let's go ahead and do man hostname. And this right here gives me the manual for the hostname. Now notice it tells me hostname, show or set the system. So I can not only print it, but I can also change it. I can do the domain name. And it gives you, again, this is actually the format. These are the different flags and options or options you can go and select. And then it gives you a little bit more information about these flags. What is TAC A? You can either choose to do TAC A or TAC alias. So you're going to hear that term too, TAC. Whenever I say TAC, it's usually referring to the minus sign. Okay. So display the alias names of the host if possible. Okay. So we can look at this and it's really big. Now there is also another short way we can do this. Typically, a lot of times, we have a opportunity to where we can actually get a shortened like Cliff Note version, and this is going to be TAC. It's either going to be TAC H, okay, or TAC help. Now, not every command is going to have TAC H or TAC help, but the a very robust amount of actual commands have this. So you can see this is a lot shorter than what we were given in the manual page, okay? Now, one of the more modern ones is something called the info page. So we can do info hostname. And this also gives us a more succinct information. But notice it doesn't really give you a lot. It's almost like getting the actual, I would say, to me, it's like getting the actual manual page, because it's very lengthy as well. So I mean, there's not much of a difference. But some commands like uname have an info page, and you can see right here next host name invocation. Previously is MP rock invocation. So this is checking this right here. Okay, and we ran these commands. We talked about actually uname. So I did uname like this. So now if I do uname TAC H. So let's do TAC help. You can see I ran the TAC R. TAC R stands for kernel release. So print the kernel release. That's the kernel release I'm running. And then TAC A, which stands for all, print all information in the following order: except, omit, TAC P, and if, and TAC I if unknown. Okay. So it's going to print this out in the following order, you know. So it's going to go ahead and follow the actual format. So we can kind of see how this actually works. We can go ahead and look at this right here. Now, let's say, for example, I'm not too sure. I don't remember the command I want to run, okay? Well, one of the easier things we can do is we can actually do what's called Apropo. And it's A-P-R-O-P-O-S, Apropo, okay? Now, Apropo, if you're not familiar with the actual term, apropos is a legitimate term. It's a legitimate English term. And what it refers, what it actually is defined as is that when we say, oh, that's very apropos, we say it's within reference to, or it's actually concerning. It's concerning this topic. So when you think about this, think of think of this like as a keyword search, okay? Apropos. So let's say, for example, I'm trying to figure out, you know what, I want to see what commands I can run. We ran the ls-usb command, but let's say I forgot it, right? I know I want to run a command and it had USB in it. So I can do apropos USB. Let's see real quick. All right, so apologize for that. I had to take a little bit of a break. There was an issue with my apropos command, and I want to go ahead and just kind of talk about it because this goes into the next one, which is going ahead and being how to solve the issue. So I actually when I was running apropos, if you saw that I was getting failed to download metadata for repo, or actually, sorry, I was getting a different command. I ended up getting two commands at once. Let's see. Here we go. Can I prepare internal mirror list upstream? And that was the error I was getting for apropos. Okay. So I went ahead and actually tried to see, well, maybe I can go ahead and figure out what's going on. So I was actually able to go ahead and update my systems, but it gave me some errors that I had actually updated. So for this update metadata for repo upstream, I had to do some fixing and I had to run a couple commands to fix it, okay? And then once I did that, I was able to go ahead and run this command called update db. So apropos is basically a way that I can actually, like, you know how in the Windows environment, when you're trying to search for something, right? Let me see if I can replicate it here. I'm trying to search on this side. I'm trying to search for, you know, final. Sometimes it gives me a little box up here that says this place hasn't been indexed, okay? To speed up the search process, make sure you go ahead, you can click here to index the, you know, the directory or the hard drive or whatever the case may be, right? Well, apropos works like an index. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear my screen real quick. And we're gonna do this again. We're gonna do apropos USB. So I'm looking for the command ls USB, but I forgot what the command is. So I went ahead and did apropos USB. And in the process of doing apropos USB, I actually am able to go and query against all the different commands and the man pages that have USB in the actual manual page. And lo and behold, there's the command right there I was looking for, ls USB. Cool. So these are actually key term searches. And we can do this again too. Let's say I want to go ahead and look at, I don't remember the command for compression, but I can do apropos compression. Or compress, actually. There we go. Sorry. So these are all the commands that have compress in the actual manual page. So I can choose one of these that maybe I wanted to work with, okay? So this is how we use apropos. This is how we use the man pages, man, and then the command itself, whatever command you want to go ahead and do. And then also there's the tac h or tac help. So with this, I can then start using this to my advantage. And let's say, for example, if we go back to a previous video, we did user add, right? I can do tac help. And I can now see all the different options that I can give for this actual command. And I can go ahead and start tailoring this command to do what I want to do. Or I can also see if this is the command that I want to do something with. Is this actually the command I'm thinking of, or is it something different? So this is how we get help. For this module, there's going to be some test your skills. There's going to be a quiz at the end of this. And it's really going to get you practicing how to work through this these actual terminals and getting familiar with using the command line interface. In all actuality, it's not difficult. Do I expect you to memorize all these commands? No. You will memorize these commands over time because the more and more you use them, it's like any language. Think of it like a language. The more and more you immerse yourself and you use the language, the more familiar the recall is for these commands. So also, I will go ahead and actually check in the module. There actually is a command cheat sheet. There's not a list of all the commands in the Linux operating system, but it is a list of common commands. I guess it's a big list, but these are common commands that you may need to know as an administrator or as a cybersecurity professional, or just someone that wants to go ahead and play around with Linux. Okay. Other than that, check out the assignments going to be for this module 1, and then once you're finished with that, you can go ahead and move on to module 2. Good having everyone there.